you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I was interested in what the honourable gentleman referred to. I think it had something to do with hard-working families and how the present housing benefit system impacts against people who wish to work hard. And I was reminded of the first Thatcherite regime when his party deemed a living wage to be 75p an hour. I can also remember during our term in government, his party voting against every single issue, for example, the national minimum wage, any move to help take people out of poverty. The interesting thing that has come out of this afternoon's debate, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is that that side of the House has swallowed hook, line and sinker the myths on these issues that were originally proselytised by their Prime Minister, who stood on the floor of this House and castigated housing benefit because it was paying £1,000 and £2,000 a week. He attempted to present that as being the median for people claiming housing benefit. I was so intrigued by that, I tabled a question on the issue. There are in fact no claimants on £2,000 a week, and there are precisely 90 families in London exclusively who are having to pay rent, housing benefit is having to pay rent of £1,000 a week because these are extremely large families. The then myth that the government has successfully proselytised has been that the majority of people on housing benefit live in a 4-bedroom property. Nothing could be further from the truth. The majority of people on housing benefit are either in a shared room or in 1 or 2-bedroom properties. And in my constituency, the amount that those claimants will lose range from £21 a week for a shared room to £246 a week if they are fortunate to be in a 4-bedroom property. The other... Yes.
I just wonder if the honourable member would agree with me that the 10 families in my constituency living in a 5-bedroom property isn't because they have a dressing room or an extra ensuite. It's because of the nature of families now where we have a mother and a father bringing children from previous relationships possibly, and the members on the other side of the House just don't seem to be able to grasp this.
Well, that's a very salient contribution on the part of my honourable friend. Indeed, that could be replicated within my own constituency. I know of a family who has 2 children who are severely disabled, both in wheelchairs. They have 2 children who are not so severely disabled. There is a mother and a father and a grandmother all attempting to live in a 4-bedroom property. The other myth that has been run by the party opposite this afternoon is that these changes are essentially fair. I can distinctly remember the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister, who has proven himself to be the Marshal Pétain of his generation, arguing that these changes were not only fair, but they were absolutely committed at a time when the government was having to make very, very difficult choices to protect the most vulnerable in our society. And what we have seen from the benches opposite through the entire afternoon, that they do not regard pensioners as vulnerable, nor do they apparently regard pensioners as being taxpayers. They do not regard people with disabilities as being vulnerable. They do not regard people on low pay as actually working. If I look at my constituency and my city of London, and it is not scaremongering, we've been here before. Some of us can remember, as I've said, the previous Thatcherite regime, when people were forced out of their homes, where we had people sleeping on the streets because they couldn't afford to find anywhere to live, where the bills for bed and breakfast were astronomical. And I'm sure the members opposite are smiling at that memory, because that essentially is what they wish to do. They wish to... let me finish this point. They wish absolutely to get rid of social housing. I give way to my honourable member.
I thank the honourable member for giving way, and I promise not to annoy her again. It was just to highlight the fact that the members opposite are finding much of this humorous and funny, and they like to portray this fact that this is apparently work-shy or unemployed people taking benefit from those that hard-working taxpayers right across the country. Isn't the truth actually that only 1 in 8 people who receive housing benefit are actually unemployed, and I think the members opposite should take this debate more seriously.
My honourable friend is wishing for the moon. The party opposite aren't interested in facts. They absolutely discount everything that emanates from this side of the House. They also discount they also discount the briefings that we have all received from organisations such as Shelter, such as Crisis, such as the Charter for the Institute of Chartered Housing, for the Citizens Advice Bureaus, from the National Housing Federation, of the real danger and damage that these ill-thought-out plans are going to inflict upon some of the most vulnerable people in our society. But we've been here before. We've seen all this. As Crisis had, in a submission made earlier by Crisis, they have pointed out that it will cost £60 a day for a room in bed and breakfast. And if we look back to the earlier history of bed and breakfast, the Honourable Member for Colchester referred to the history of 1945. I was somewhat surprised he didn't take us back to a much closer history of what actually happened to people in this country under the first Thatcherite regime. He was concerned with children then. I was somewhat surprised that he did not concern himself with children at this time, because he knows that the greatest damage inflicted on children was when they were stuck in those absolutely abominable bed and breakfast situations, where not infrequently those families were turned out onto the street at 9 o'clock in the morning and not allowed to return until 5 o'clock in the evening. And this is apparently the coalition's government way of taking people out of poverty. I find it absolutely incongruous that they believe that they will take people out of poverty by making them homeless, because that is essentially what they're going to do. I'll give way.
I'm much obliged. I think we've sat through her speech with varying degrees of incredulity. While admiring the histrionic performance, we are still at a loss to know what her position is on the cap. Does she think it is right that in her collection, I'm fully entitled to ask her a specific question as to her view on the cap, and that there are people in her constituency who are earning or receiving far more than £20,000 a year on housing benefit.
The honourable gentleman had been here from the beginning of this debate, he would not have been as ill-informed as he is ill-mannered. There are lots of people in my constituency. There are not people in my constituency who are claiming housing benefit at that rate, as I've had occasion to say to him. The majority of housing benefit claimants live in 1- and 2-bedroom properties. We have already said that we would certainly introduce a cap, but not in the method that his government is proposing. There should be a regional element. From a sedentary position, the Minister is waving his hands in disbelief. He was leaping up to that dispatch box during this afternoon, asking questions of what my party, if in government, would have done. And he knows, and I know, that if my party had been in government and he had still been in opposition and we had introduced his policies, he would have fought them tooth and nail. So the honourable gentleman has absolutely no cover anymore. He, as I've said, I've had occasion to say in this House, his party has become the 30 Pieces of Silver party, and nowhere is that more marked in what they're proposing to do to some of the most vulnerable people in all our constituencies. Because I say to members opposite, this is not exclusively a problem for London. This is going to affect the whole country. And when the second tranche of their government's approach to social housing comes in, which is the increase of rents to at least 80% and to remove secure tenancies, this is going to have an impact that is going to run and run and run. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman if he's still eager.
Grateful to the honourable lady for giving way. Is there not some vulnerability in those hard-working people on low incomes who also need to be treated fairly by our society, as opposed to the focus of so many of the honourable lady's friends opposite, who are referring to those on housing benefit and receiving more from the state
from the taxpayer than many working poor could actually dream of sustaining themselves.
I'm intrigued to know how the honourable gentleman can equate the idea that it will benefit those low-paid, hard-working families who are not claiming housing benefit by making those low-paid, hard-working families who are on housing benefit both unemployed and also homeless, because they will have to move from where they are presently living, and, I hasten to add, where they provide services that the honourable gentleman and all his honourable friends wouldn't dream of ever having to do, but which we are all dependent upon those services being provided. And when that happens in the centre of London, then we are going to see, I know they don't like it, but